Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Playing with Power podcast, a podcast where we talk about all things CEDH, EDH, and Magic the Gathering. I am your host, Ryan.
And I am your host, CK, and today we are going to talk about the latest set, Lost Caverns of Ixalan. We will be talking about the top CEDH cards from the set and do a quick rundown of the set's mechanics, but not before we talk about our sponsors. Our merchandise is now available in our store. We have dice, coins, tokens, sleeves, and more all available. Go to playingwithpowermtg.com and help support the channel. If you are looking for t-shirts, we also have a bonfire store. We have cool designs available, and all purchases help out the channel. You can also support us on Patreon. Patrons get access to our Discord, webcam league, playdays, early access to videos, names in the credits of our show, exclusive videos, merchandise, and the ability to be on an episode. There are tiers for everyone, so go to patreon.com/playingwithpowermtg and help support the show. Finally, a big thanks to Wizards of the Coast for sponsoring this podcast. If you're looking for Lost Caverns of Ixalan, be sure to check the links in the show notes or the description below. If you're looking to sponsor this podcast, please reach out in the email below.
Yes, and speaking of Patreon that you mentioned earlier, we do a Patreon shout-out in every episode, and today's Patreon shout-out goes to Taylor Wheaton.
Ooh, thank you, Taylor.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you. All right, so let's dive in. So Lost Caverns of Ixalan. So we're going to basically talk about the set mechanics really quick, and we're also going to kind of go over what our top 5 CEDH cards would be from this set. We're also going to do some quick honorable mentions and stuff like that in there, because there was actually a decent amount that kind of do fit in the different decks that are out there in the CEDH landscape. But, you know, there's some that I would say don't make the cut and stuff, but we'll talk about that in more detail. So first of all, how do you feel about this set?
When it was first announced that we were going back to Ixalan, I think I almost peed my pants. I was so excited. I love the pirates. I love the dinos. Gashap is one of my favorite, like, casual commanders of all time. And so this was a set that I was really excited for, and I don't think it disappointed. Looking at these cards, a lot of them are like, yeah, I can see where that's going to be. I can definitely see that this is going. I know with my personal play groups, we've been talking about adding a lot of these cards in. So yeah, I don't think it disappointed. There's some real bangers in the set for sure.
For the longest time, whenever they would revisit a plane, in my opinion, they would always do a worse job. Like, the first iteration of a plane was always really, really good.
Agreed.
And the subsequent iterations were always junk. You know, first iteration of Innistrad, one of the best of all time, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Subsequent iterations, awful. In my opinion, they did not do well with things like Innistrad. They just didn't, in my opinion. Kamigawa and now Lost Caverns of Ixalan is, in my opinion, the better of these two sets.
100%.
So they're actually taking and, like, making them better. Like, I personally feel that Lost Caverns of Ixalan was better than the original Ixalan.
Ooh.
I think Ixalan was cool and established a plane and had the flavor and stuff like that. I think that was all really neat. But I think this one is better than the OG one, in my opinion.
I could see that. That's not like a far-fetched thing. I definitely agree with Neon Dynasty. I think Neon Dynasty washes the original Kamigawa blocks, like, off the face of the map. Like, it's so good. And I can definitely see an argument, like, looking at a lot of the things that they did flavor-wise too with a lot of these cards. They're so beautiful to look at. Yeah, so I definitely agree on that. I like Ixalan. I think they did a really good job in terms of bringing that same flavor, but also building on top of it in a way that makes it good for people who are just, like, joining in Magic, and who may not have been at Ixalan that first time that we went around. They still have things to look forward to. And it's not just, oh, yeah, it's the dinosaur pirate plane from before. Like, no, there's some new stuff here, and it looks really good.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they, honestly, from an overall set perspective, they hit it out of the park. The precons as well, so the commander part of it, they were, like, at first look, they're like, oh, okay, yes, here's some pirates, here's some vampires, here's some dinos, blah, blah, blah. It's, okay, that's fine. They slap. They're really good. They're really good.
They're amazing. That pirate precon is coming home with me immediately. Like, oh my gosh.
They are fun. I recommend anybody out there who likes to play just precon Magic, to pick these up. They play really well against each other. They play really well on their own. WotC has been hitting it out of the park when it comes to the precons lately. For the longest time, they didn't do well.
No.
Like, they were always all over the place, and they just didn't do very well. These, as of the last, I would say 18 months, have been very, very good.
Yeah, I agree. And especially if you're a collector too, they got some really decent reprints in these ones as well. So yeah, I know Pitiless Plunderer is in one of the decks. There's
the $10 uncommon. Yes.
I like it. It's good.
It's a lot of people like it. So it's $10. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of cards in there that are really good for collectors, and then also it's a lot of cool archetypes that I think a lot of people have been missing support for. We talked about pirates. Merfolk is back, and that's really powerful and popular. So I know a lot of people are going to be wanting that deck specifically. Dinos, same thing. Like I just said, Shaft is one of my favorites, so definitely going to be looking at that. And vampires, everybody loves vampires. It's good. So yeah, it's a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so let's dive into the set mechanics. We don't want to spend a ton of time on this or anything like that, but we wanted to kind of let everyone know what is there, what's returning, what's new, what does that kind of mean from a CEDH perspective. So let's go ahead and just dive right into it. So let's just get it out of the way right now, what the returning mechanics are. So Explore is a returning mechanic. You look at the top card, and if it's a land, you put it in your hand. And if it's not, you can put it back on top or put it in the graveyard and gets a 1/1 counter. That is the Explore mechanic. We don't see this really in CDH. Maybe there's a fringe thing here and there. I can't even tell you a single game where I've ever seen an Explore mechanic in CDH, but it's there.
It is there. And you were saying the Oracle text for it, and I was like, is that what it does? Yeah, that is. So
yeah, it gets a counter and does a thing, and yeah.
Sometimes you get a card, sometimes you're not. It's a land. But it does return, and there are some really neat ways that they implemented it in some of these cards.
Yeah, they did it with some like map tokens and stuff like that. So they are exploring it a little bit more, but it's definitely it's definitely doesn't see a home in CDH in my opinion. Didn't before, and I don't think it does
now. No.
The other one is transforming cards. It's like Growing Rights of Itlamok and stuff like that, where hey, does this and it transforms. That's back. We've seen this 1,000 times. It's not really a lot to say about it, but like it's here as well.
Yeah.
But so let's talk about, there's 4 mechanics that are present, the 4 new mechanics that are present in this set. So the first one is Craft, and Craft is basically the mechanic where you take, a certain mechanic, pay a cost, or take a card, pay a cost, and like kind of combine it with other things. I'm going to craft with, certain creatures in your graveyard, or I'm going to craft with certain things on the battlefield and stuff like that, and you can kind of transform it into whatever it crafted into. And that's what the craft mechanic is. And they did a number of different things with the craft mechanic, but overall, that is what the craft, it's kind of like combining some cards together. They did combining before with like Brizella and stuff, and that just kind of flopped. That didn't really work too well. Yeah, the meld mechanic. But I feel like this craft mechanic, from just a mechanic standpoint, seems pretty cool. Whether or not it has a CDH implication, I don't know. But what are your thoughts?
It's flavorful. I think the problem for me in terms of like translating it to CDH is it seems like a lot of the craft costs that I have seen on cards has been like, craft with an artifact and a vampire, or like pirate, a vampire, and a merfolk. And it's like the amount of times that I'm going to have all of those things available at one time with the speed that the format is in, it's just not going to happen, especially for a lot of the payoff that it has too. Because not only is it like, okay, do I have these things? Can I do it? It's also, is it worth it? And so it's a fun, flavorful mechanic for sure. I don't know how often you would see it in our format.
And if so, it's going to be some fringe thing that just really synergizes well with a commander or a card, maybe someday down the line. But as of right now, I'm not really thinking that we're going to see any craft, or if we're going to see cards with craft on them, that we're probably not going to see the craft mechanic being utilized.
Right.
There's like a card or two that, does some cool stuff with ETBs, and the craft is also there, but you're like, whatever, who cares?
Right.
That craft, whatever. So that's craft. So the next mechanic is Descend. So Descend is an interesting one because you have a couple of different things with Descend. So you can basically what the Descend is that if a permanent enters your graveyard from anywhere, that's right. So if a permanent enters your graveyard from anywhere, so if you mill it, if a permanent dies or anything like that, then you get to that's the Descend trigger, if you will. Now it is important to say that it says if a permanent card was put into your graveyard from anywhere. I'm not a judge, but I think that doesn't include tokens.
No, because tokens won't be counted as a card. So it'll hit, and it'll be a permanent, and it'll fizz away, and then you won't get the Descend off of it.
Yeah. So that's discard, that's mill, that's permanents being destroyed or dying creatures or anything. That is the Descend mechanic.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts? Do you think you see any CDH implications from this?
Hermit Druid so back, baby. We're going. Oh, man. Descend is the mechanic when we were talking about new mechanics that I was like, this can actually be interesting. Just because mill already is such a prominent strategy with things like Breach and things like that, I could definitely see some synergy there. And when we talk to our list, I know there are some cards that I saw that have decent amount of Descend synergy in there that we can talk about later. But I think it's probably the most competitive of the four new mechanics off the top of my head, just because mill is already such a prominent strategy that we're doing in our format anyways.
Sure.
So it's like, okay, why not get something out of it anyways if that's what I'm trying to do, is fill this Breach or fill this reanimate strategy like Razaketh lines, Hoarding Broodlord, stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's good. I'd like to have a name for what I'm doing now that isn't just mill. That sounds cool. Descend. Oh, no.
Nice. Descending. Oh, looks like I've descended twice now.
Exactly. Now I can sound fun.
Yeah, not just milling. Now we're milling and descending. How about that? Speaking of which, there is actually an additional part of this mechanic, which is you have Descend 4, Descend 8, and then Fathomless Descent. So this is kind of like not tacked on. I'm not a judge, so I'm not saying anything in an official capacity. But basically, there's also a thing that gets checked or a triggered ability that says if you have 4 or more permanents in your graveyard, or if you have 8 or more, or Fathomless Descent, which says we're going to check how many permanents are in your graveyard if you're doing something, either resolving a spell or maybe a triggered ability or something. So that's a little bit of an appendage onto the Descend mechanic. Yeah. So I agree with you. I think that there's something there. I don't know if it's like obvious on a surface level, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 cards that we might talk about. But I think that there's some unexplored space here, kind of like in the first Ixalan. A lot of times on the very surface of the first Ixalan, a lot of people are like, it didn't get open. And that's why all the cards from OG Ixalan are so expensive, because they ended up being good and they just didn't find out till later. I think this might be that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I could definitely see it. And yeah, with the costs tacked on to it, it reminds me a lot of Delirium, but handled a lot better, because Delirium was obviously you need this many different permanents in it. And it's no, this is just counting permanents plural. And a lot of decks, especially creature heavy decks, like reanimation strategies and stuff like that, can do that very easily. So yeah, definitely think there's something there.
And then there's the next mechanic, which is Discover. This mechanic is amazing. This will see play. Absolutely. It's basically Cascade with upside.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
How does it get any better? Cascade, all the downsides of Cascade are now gone. That's so good. It's amazing.
And when you said it, I was like, oh yeah, they did just have that keyword, because I was like, oh, that's just Cascade every time I was looking at the card. But no, you get to add it to your hand if you want to. Oh, why?
So I'm discovering, and I run into a Pact of Negation. That's fine, because now I don't have to cast it. I can put it in my hand. Yeah, that's amazing. That's insane. Such a good ability. Yeah. It's like I said, it's Cascade with strict upside now. Yeah. You don't have to breed as many brewing restrictions in your deck, because for example, a lot of Cascade decks, they will not run things like Pact of Negation as the example I use, because they want to hit a 0-drop mana rock and not Pact of Negation by accident and mess up their cascade. Discover allows you to get around that, and it's a really cool mechanic. I'm a big fan of it.
Yeah, it also gets around things, if I'm not mistaken, Drain of Magistrate, stuff like that, just because, I can't cast it from exile, but sure, I'll just add it to my hand, and now all of a sudden, it's live. So, there's definitely, Discover is great. Yeah, I retract my statement on Descend. Oh, because now that I'm thinking about it, that's really good. Yeah.
Yeah. Discover will see CDH play in one way, shape, or form. I absolutely guarantee it. Like, it's really good. And I think they were reserved on how they did the Discover mechanic. So, and I think that was positive because they could have really cracked it wide open really early and messed up things. But now that this Discover mechanic exists, we will see this in the future. This won't be a reserved mechanic for only this. I can almost guarantee it. We're going to see it in Commander product. We're going to see it in other things. It's a really cool mechanic, and we're going to see some more of it.
100%. 100%.
Final one was Finality. Basically, it's, something might enter the battlefield from the graveyard, and it'll have a finality counter on it. And basically all the mechanic is just a way to say you can't recur things. If it has a finality counter, it gets exiled. If it would die, it won't go to the graveyard. Whatever, a little mechanic. It's just part of it.
Boo, let me break things.
I know. But I mean, honestly, there is some degree of brokenness that might come from it, but we just haven't seen it explored yet. The idea that if you have a finality counter on it, you might be able to cheat costs in some way, because usually the cheaper cost stuff can be more broken. And so usually if they want something that you could recur or make it recur, they overcost it on purpose. Back in the day, bringing stuff back from the graveyard used to be cheap.
Right.
And now it doesn't ever seem to be a mechanic that costs less than 5.
Yeah.
They've kind of settled that 5 is the number that you need to spend to bring something back from your graveyard. And the idea that this finality thing can maybe now make that cost reduced a little might be cool. But we'll have to see.
It's cool. And I can definitely see something, if it's a counter that it's movable, I could definitely see some interaction there with like any commander that can remove counters from a thing, like a Tayam
is a good example.
Exactly. Yeah, I was thinking like, oh yeah, we bring this back with the finale, counter, get rid of it, bring it back. Yeah, there's definitely some lines there.
Yeah, I'm sure the Tayam players are probably already brewing something with finality counters, because that is something that could probably be looped. I'm not sure which cards they might be doing that with, but I'm just saying that there's probably some potential there. Way more edge case, way more niche. We're not going to see like mainstay play of finality stuff, in my opinion, but it's cool. It's a little add-on mechanic.
Yeah.
All right. It's time for our top CDH cards. Well, it's time. All right. But before we do that, I want to go over some honorable mentions. So because there was, in our opinion, more than 5 that I think we'll see CDH play. And we each have our own 5, but we also had some things like, hey, these we'll probably see play, but they probably, they don't quite make the cut. And so why don't you start off with your honorable mentions? We're not going to read all the different card names and stuff for this. We're going to, kind of go through them a little fast because we want to actually get to our list and whatnot. But kick us off. What are your honorable mentions?
So right off the bat, we were looking at a lot of the same cards, I think, and I think one that a lot of people are going to agree with is Tishana's Tidebender. I think it's a card that there's 2 camps, right? I've seen half of the people are like, oh, this is broken, this is going to shut down Kitten. And then I have the other half that is like, if I don't play Trickbind, I'm not playing less. And I think the difference for me in what made it's good. It's got a really good effect. But what made it not go into my top 5 is the fact that similar effects are not played anyways. I'm not playing Pithing Needle. I'm not playing like things that are stopping activated abilities anyways. That stick around longer than this does. Yeah, because it's a creature. I can Orcish Bowmasters this to the day. I mean, granted, I guess you could counter it with Bowmasters. Like, you could counter Bowmasters with it, but like, I don't know. There's so many. I would much rather have a more versatile card in my deck to handle those strategies than to have to hope that they trigger it. I have it in my hand. I have 3 mana open, and it resolves in order to do that.
I'm glad we got this out of the way now. Tishana's Tidebinder is on my honorable mentions list too, and that is mostly to placate. This isn't a CEDH card as much as we would love it to be. This is the classic fairy mastermind.
Mm-hmm.
This is all those cards that everyone's like, oh, this is so broken. It's going to be in every single deck. And Magic players are notorious for not being able to evaluate cards in a vacuum.
Yeah.
I didn't say CDH players. I didn't say Commander players. I said Magic players.
All of us. Every
Yes.
last one of us.
All of us. We are so bad at it. And after you do it enough times and as long as you're kind of looking at the historical data, you're realizing that this card isn't actually going to do anything. Will it see play? Yes, it will. And then it'll get cut after it's been dead in your hand for 10 games in a row. And you're like, wow, I didn't want to hold up 3 every time.
Yeah.
And it's just a little too much to get this little trick is what it is, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. It's 3 is just a little too expensive for me for that kind of thing when I can just pay 1 and pongify whatever I'm trying to get rid of.
Exactly. So I have a couple on mine. On my honorable mentions, I'm just going to mention them together. Bitter Triumph and Get Lost, basically some decent removal. You know, I think that they're actually pretty good. I think that they will see some fringe play, or maybe some play when some people might not have certain budget options and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We can talk about proxy arguments all day long, but there are plenty of tournaments out there like Star City Games that are proxy-less. They don't allow proxies. And so these might be some decent picks for decks that might want some good removal. These are pretty good removal spells. I think that they might see some fringe play or some budget play or something to that effect, but they don't quite make the cut.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely we'll see play in 60 card, but as far as like format, our format specifically, there's just better options.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I think other than that, the only other one that I wanted to talk about is Zayawa's Justice. It's a card I think we both had on our list. That is really interesting. Kind of like a fun little chaos warpy kind of effect. I don't know. I like it. I think the word it's cute. It's cute. It's nice. But I also am not playing chaos warp in most of my decks because I don't want my creature meta is kind of a live thing, and I don't want to flip my opponent into a Seaborn Muse, or anything else, and then have everybody look at me like, you were supposed to deal with the problem. I thought I was. No. And this has very similar downsides. But I mean, again, like you said, budget options are always a thing. It's there. It's 2 mana. So that's kind of nice. But yeah. Other options are available.
This will see CEDH play. It just won't see a lot of CEDH play. This slots perfectly into mono red decks. Godo will run it. Mm-hmm. It's great for Godo because it'll remove a lot of the problem things in Godo. It removes your Draneth Magistrates, your opposition agents, and stuff like that. And go ahead and flip into another 2-drop. That's fine. I don't care.
Yeah.
But literally, when you start to branch out into any other color, it's outclassed. It's not enough. And so is this going to see CEDH play? 100%, but only probably in mono red decks. And that's why it doesn't really make my cut either.
Indeed.
Yep. I do want to make one other mention, and that is what a lot of people are probably also talking about in the Commander space and the CEDH space, and that is Charismatic Conqueror. That's the one where whenever an artifact or creature is a battlefield under an opponent's control, they may tap it, and if they don't, you get to create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. Yeah. So I think that when this gets slotted into decks and when it lands, that it will absolutely, go insane, and it'll look super scary and super intimidating. And, all of a sudden you'll cast a Dockside and you'll create 8 treasures, and you won't tap them, of course. So that person will create 8 vampires with lifelink, and that seems so scary. until you realize you're just gonna win.
That
And
is, yeah. When
you're
you were
just gonna
saying
die
it,
with 8 vampires on the battlefield. Is what you're gonna do.
yeah.
Yeah.
When you were saying it, I was like, oh, that's nice. And I was like, bodies. I don't want. Sure, make 8/11s. I'm just thoughts as Oracle. Does it resolve? Like, yeah,
Yeah. You're like, I'm done. Yeah, I guess so.
yeah.
Will this see play in some decks? Like, I can see it having a home in certain, not all, certain Tymna decks.
100%.
Like, I'm going to test it out in Mad Farm, Tymna Jessica, because I want a whole bunch of bodies to connect with Tymna to draw cards. So I can see certain places where this will see play. That's why this is honorable mentions. I'm not saying that these cards are not good. I'm saying that they're right on the cusp of being in the top, but they're like basically the top 10. They're just not the top 5. And this will see some play. I just don't think it'll see a lot. It is top 5 time. Kick us off. What is your number 5?
Okay, my number 5 might be a fringe pick for some, but I read this card and immediately was like, this is kind of crazy. It is a Nim Pakel, 1000th Moon. It's the one that makes a bunch of gnomes in Boros. And all I have to say is Winota. I read that and I was like, is it enough to make the deck, crazy or anything? No, it's already a good deck. But I do think it's going to be good. It just goes really wide in a deck that already wants to go wide with non-human creatures. And you just get a bunch of triggers because of it if they don't answer it. And I think that's really good. Any thoughts?
I think that a Nim Pakal 1000th Moon is going to see probably some testing in Winota, simply because I think this will be kind of the backup for Winota gets blown out too much. Everyone's on the Winota train. The secret's out about old Winota. Like, you just kill the commander that it doesn't function. And I think this one might be something that they could leverage. Because number one, you can get this onto the battlefield with your Winota triggers. Am I saying that right or am I saying that wrong? I always get Winota backwards. Whenever you attack with
non-humans, you get
when you
humans.
attack. That's it. Yeah, so you will be able to flip into this with Winota, which is nice. And then you can, and if Winota gets removed, you still have this kind of ability to still kind of be in the game and still kind of have something to do. Jury's out. I'm not a Winota expert by any means, so I don't know if this is going to be, the thing that is the mainstay or not. But I think that there is definitely some testing that could be done with this.
Yeah, 100%. It to me feels very much like Clown Car in the same sense of in that deck, where it's just we're gonna make a bunch of bodies, and if Winota's on the board, great. That's gonna help us advance our game plan super. If not, okay, cool. Then we're just gonna go wide and hit while we're stacking out the board. Either way, the game plan is good. And so I think it's going to be a card that definitely sees some testing for sure.
Yep. Agreed. All right. So my number 5 is Squirming Emergence. It is 1 black and a green for a sorcery. And it has Fathomless Descent, like we talked about the mechanic earlier. And it says, return to the battlefield target non-land permanent card in your graveyard with mana value less than or equal to the number of permanent cards in your graveyard. So basically, this is Savine's Reclamation in Golgari. It's super cool. I think that Jund decks will love this. I think Golgari decks will love this. I think basically if you're in these colors and you're not in white, so whatever that color combination might end up being, I think that you'll probably want to see something like this going. I could see Hermit Druid decks, using this card to maybe get back a Hermit Druid or maybe
baby. But yeah.
So I think Squirming Emergence is going to be really, really cool. It's really good recursion and it's permanent. It's not like non-land permanent. It's not something whatever permanent. You can pay 3 and you can get back a fetch land if you're in a bad spot. Like it still does that too. Savine's has the flashback. I'm not saying this is a 1-for-1 for Savine's, but I'm just saying that this is kind of like a Savine strategy for those that are in Sans White. And so I think it's a really cool card and I think it'll see some play. What about you?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I agree. It's one of those cards. It didn't make it into my top 5 just because I don't play the decks that will probably use this to like its best advantage. So I think my ceiling is a lot lower for it than other people's are. But I can definitely see that. I know for a fact, as a Pioneer player, this is going in Greasefang like day one, 100%.
It's so
But
good in that
it,
deck.
but I can definitely see it being in a lot of reanimation strategies. I've heard talks about like TNT could probably use this as some kind of recursion if they wanted to.
Yep.
I know that deck definitely has been wanting some kind of support for a little bit. So that could definitely work. It's not 1-for-1 for Savines, but it helps a lot, especially if you are on something like a Hermit's Druid or, some kind of sacrifice engine, things like Thyme. Again, you have a recursion in your command zone, but I mean, why not have another card in case your commander is not on board? There's definitely some play here. It's a really good card. I like it. And it's not high costed either for what it does.
Yeah, big fan. All right, what's your number 4?
Ooh, number 4. Okay, number 4 I'm actually super excited about. It is Malcolm Alluring Scoundrel. So when I was actually at work and people were texting me and were like, hey, new Malcolm just dropped. And I was like, oh boy, does it have partner? And I looked and it did not. And so at first I was a little disappointed, and then I kept reading the card and I was like, actually, no, this has some really good things in it. So for people who don't know what the card we're talking about, it's 2-drop, 1 blue. It's got flash, it's got flying, and then whenever it deals combat damage to a player, it gets a song counter, like an alert
chorus counter.
Chorus counter, yeah. And then you get to draw and discard. And if you get 4 or more of those counters on that card, whatever you discard, you get to play without paying its mana cost. And so immediately I was like, oh, that's cute. I like that a lot. Now, the only reason this is not higher on my list is because the likelihood that your opponents are going to let you get 4 counters on that thing, probably not high. But even if I don't get the 4 counters, I'd like a draw discard, especially in Dimir decks. Any deck that's just wants looting effects. It's nice. It's nice to have, and especially on a body too, with flash, and it's flying, so it's evasive. It's got a lot going for it. Would I play this in the command zone? Probably not. I don't really want to do mono blue things. But in the 99, I think it definitely is going to find a lot of spots in decks.
See, this is not in my top 5. I'm not sure if this was good enough. So this is where we get to the contentious part of the podcast. It's time to argue. Yeah, it's time to argue. I don't like this card. And the reason is because I think that flash flying is good. 2-drop is good. It's, it's got evasion and it's flash. You can do it on an instep, which is nice. A lot of people might be scared of an Orcish Bowmasters based on this, and so they might hold back certain things. And then on the instep, you're just flashing in this Malcolm. That's cool, but looting, to fill a graveyard, okay, sure, that's not bad. You'll never get to 4 counters. That'll never happen. If you get to 4 counters, you've won that game anyway. So it's not really doing much else for you. It's things are going so much in your favor that you're grinding Malcolm to 4 chorus counters is really saying something. The fact that it's a chorus counter, which means there's basically no abusing whatsoever. I don't think a chorus counter has existed up until this point. There are certain counters that they really, really are stingy on. One of the ones I always remember is Eon counters. There's Magosi the Water Veil. It's a random land from Zendikar. And only they recently reprinted another thing with an Eon counter. It's the first time in a decade they've ever done it. Yeah. And I think chorus counters is similar. I could be wrong. Let us know in the comments, of course. Maybe there's one from 25 years ago and I missed it or whatever. Right. But so you're going to have to earn these chorus counters the hard way or through some proliferation strategy, which no one does that in CDH.
Yeah. And that is, I definitely agree. I think this to me, though, sits on a similar plane to a Ledger Shredder kind of thing, where instead of being passive, where you're just kind of sitting and waiting for your opponents to play the spells, you can just get the effect anyways through your own actions. And yeah, it might not stick around to get to 4 counters, but at least I'm going to draw at least 2 or 3 cards off of it. And who knows if I'm playing in, Blue Farm and I have this with a Tymna out, I'm drawing actually more. And so I think
drawing and looting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think it's got some neat effects, but I definitely do agree. If you're getting this to 4 counters, it's almost as if you're ulting into Vesh. Like, how did you do this? This is wild. Congrats.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So if you're ulting to Vesh, you're winning the game anyway. If you're chorusing, Malcolm's draw and loots, good for you. You're winning anyway. But it's cool that you get to do it.
Awesome. Yeah. So
all right,
yeah,
cool.
your card.
Yep. So number 4 on my list is Roaming Throne. This is 4 for an artifact creature golem. It has ward 2 because everything has ward nowadays. Why not? As Roaming Throne enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. The Roaming Throne is the chosen type in addition to its other types. If a triggered ability of another creature you control of the chosen type triggers, it triggers an additional time. So, Roaming Throne, I think, it was discussed online when it was first spoiled and stuff like that, and some people are like, oh, this is the most busted card ever. There's that not being able to evaluate cards in a vacuum. I don't think it's the most busted card ever, but I think that this card will elevate certain decks tremendously. Like, it will do really good work for certain decks. I think that this will probably be tested in Temur Pirates, or basically a Malcolm Glinthorn type combination deck, because I think that it'll make certain things easier to trigger. Your Malcolm creates double the treasures now, which is super cool. I think Magda just got a huge boon, because not only is Roaming Throne a 4/4 now, so it could actually survive attacks, like unlike a lot of the dwarves, but whenever Magda triggers, each one is a separate trigger. So if you're turning sideways with Magda, a dwarf, and a Roaming Throne, you now have 6 treasures, because Roaming Throne is also a dwarf because you named that type. So Magda can fetch this. Magda will double these triggers. And so I think there are certain decks that are going to absolutely love this card. Is it an auto-included every deck? No. I don't think there's enough synergy. You want to lean into the tribe a little harder. But yeah, Roaming Throne, I think it's going to be really cool for some decks.
Absolutely. This is not in my top 5. However, that's because I did not think about Magda. And now I'm regretting my decisions, because that's really
funny.
Good.
That happens to Magda a lot.
That's really good. So I was thinking about this card as well. I think it's nice. It has ward as well. My only issue with it is that a lot of the times it's being there for the tribal kind of synergy or the commander synergy. I'm just going to get rid of your commander. And I've seen that happen. We were, I think a buddy of mine was talking about putting this in Orvar, and I was like, okay, cool. And so we were testing, and I just got rid of the Orvar. Or like, Orvar's not hitting the board, it won't trigger, great. So like, your wizard's not hitting, great. You have this throne, and you may sit on it lonely.
With ward 2.
With
so
ward 2.
You can't get rid of it.
You can't get rid of it, but you can look at it. It's good, and I think it's good in certain decks. This is also another card that I can see like in attack trigger based decks, like Winota or something like that. And you get your triggers. Yeah, I think it remains to be seen for me.
I agree.
Yeah, I think definitely certain decks are going to auto-include this, but are those decks then going to do anything that they're doing like differently enough to really make an impact? I don't know.
No, I agree with you 100%. I think that all those points are perfectly valid. Is this going to suddenly catapult Magda into an A+ deck? No, of course not. No.
Right.
It's going to help it a lot.
Yeah.
But it's not going to suddenly take it from where it is to all of a sudden make it the next blue farm. No,
right.
Of course not.
Right.
All right, on to number 3. What's your number 3? What's your number 3, T?
So we did all of this discussion. And with that being said, Rolling Throne is my number 3.
I don't think it's that great. I just didn't make my top 5 cut.
I wanted us to argue just a little bit or something. I don't know. With that being said, it's really good. It is good. It's I retract some of my statements. No, it's
now he does. Okay, yeah.
yeah, no, I think this does have a lot of versatility in certain strategies. But mainly because I was thinking of Winota when I was thinking of this card.
And it's good in Winota. I think it'll be worth testing in Winota. Winota has a lot of testers out there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different strategies for Winota emerging, the stacks into the turbo. And so it's really starting to evolve. And we'll see whether or not this actually falls into that camp or not. I'm not sure, but it's worth some testing, in my opinion, especially for Winota.
Absolutely. I don't want to go on this card too much because we just discussed it, and I discussed all of the cons as your devil's advocate. But I think pros for me, since we're on my number 3, I think, the ward is great. Ward is always just a little broken because you always forget about it. And then it always comes up where somebody is like, oh, yeah, I want to target this thing. And it's like, oh, well, do you pay the 2? And they're like, I immediately want to retract my statement. No.
I immediately want to take this back. Yep.
No. And then the fact that it's colorless and, you can play it in whatever. There's not an associated color. That's really good. A lot of these cards that I think we've been talking about are very pigeonholed by their color identity. And a lot of cards that I think we still have yet to talk about are also in that group, wink, wink. But I think that, the Throne does have a lot of good sides to it. I agree with a lot of your points. I just wanted to be contrarian a little bit.
Oh yeah. You were upset about how I felt about the about the Malcolm Allurian scoundrel, and you wanted me to pay for it. I understand. I get it.
I'm gonna get to 4 chorus counters, and it's gonna be great, Ryan.
You need to take a picture and post it online because
look at me. I discarded Peer into the abyss. I won the game.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. All right, so on to my number 3. My number 3 is Francisco, Foul Marauder. It is a 1 and a black for a legendary creature, bird pirate. It is flying. It can't block. It's a 0/1. Whenever 1 or more pirates you control deal damage to a player, Francisco explores. Okay, that's nice. There's one more keyword that is the most important part of this particular thing, and that is partner. Partner. They printed a partner, which is amazing. And it's a pirate. So now we can do some crazy shenanigan pirate stuff, which is super cool. Are the mechanics on here super great? Oh, is exploring going to be suddenly this cool new mechanic? No, but the idea that we now have a new partner that's a pirate, for one, so it can synergize with pirate strategies, that it is black for 2, so we have another black partner that we can use with other things. Basically, anytime any partner is printed, it does things to our format. You don't see them that often, and this is one of them. The other time that I can think of is Yoshimitsu, Ever Faithful. One random little 1-drop that was partner, 5 new decks got created off of it immediately, just because it had partner. And I definitely believe that this will be one of those things.
I agree. I think, I think it's good, but I'll hold my thoughts.
Okay. You will hold that. That is fine. So basically, I think Francisco will definitely see play in CEDH. I think it'll see play in the command zone. I think we're going to see some new pirate synergies explored off of it. I don't know if that'll end up with other things like the Roaming Throne and stuff like that, but we got new pirates with this set. This one having partner is going to do a lot of really cool things. But that is all I have to say about that. Awesome. So why don't you tell us what your number 2 is?
Oh, look, my number 2 is Francisco. This is crazy. How did it happen?
Francisco, why don't we read it? So Francisco from Marauder is 1 and a black for it.
So going back to my thoughts, yeah, I do. I think it's great. Partner is really cool. I think this opens up, like you said, a lot of decks. Immediately, I'm thinking Dimir Pirates is now a thing with Malcolm. I'm thinking Grixis Pirates is also a thing if you wanted to put this with Crom and still have the Glithorn Malcolm combo in there, albeit a little worse because Malcolm's not in the command zone in that section. You still have it, and even then can still play Breach, Thassa's Oracle. In that, that's a deck that I'm super excited to see come out if people want to test. I think that's going to be really great. I think, yeah, I agree. Anytime you see partner on a card, it's going to make a splash just because that mechanic is insane to have that kind of utility to kind of pick and choose, what do I want out of the command zone a lot more than just having this one card that's designed this one specific way. And I think they designed it well in having monocolor on this and not, trying to put two colors there. I think that's when partner really gets broken is when, okay, now I can start to make 4-color combinations, 5-color combinations, with 2 commanders. That's when it starts getting ridiculous. But I think it's going to see play 100%. I've already seen so many people talk about, oh, this is what I'm putting in this list. This is what I'm doing here. I think the 2 that I have seen the most are like Dimir Pirates with Malcolm and Francisco, and then like the Grixis, which I think are, anything in Grixis color combinations is going to be good. I think Explorer as a mechanic is not the strongest, but doesn't matter. It's still advantage, and it gets bigger. Yeah, I think it's going to be good.
Yeah, it's also low to the ground, which is nice too. It's 1 in a black. So if you want to do Tevish Crom or something like that, you're paying 5 for your Tevish. And so 1 in a black is a lot easier to get to turn on things like your Fierce Guardianships and Deadly Relics and stuff like that. So it's really nice to have Francisco be a very low-costed commander. Like you said, the Explorer mechanic, whatever, sure, a little advantage here and there. You can bend some stuff in your graveyard for breach strategies. If it's a land, you put it in your hand and make sure you're hitting your land drops. But this isn't going to be an Explore deck. That's just it might as well be flavor text on that burn.
Pretty much. Yeah. Look at me, I got lands. I'm gonna get my land drops. That's great.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I needed. Another land. Great. Well, So yeah, Francisco. Can't wait.
Okay.
All right.
You're number 1. Or number 2,
I'm down
rather.
to my number
I'm
2.
Sorry.
I am down to my number 2.
Apologies.
So my number 2 is Dauntless Dismantler. It is 1 in a white for a human artificer. It is a 1/4 artifact your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. And you can pay XX white and sacrifice it to destroy each artifact with mana value X. So why do I like this card? First of all, it's blind obedience on a body. And it's also on a body that's lightning bolt proof, which is also really great. A lot of hate bears nowadays have gone up to 3 toughness, which already makes it harder. But now this one is at 4 toughness. And the fact that artifacts your opponent's control enter the battlefield tapped is amazing. Blind obedience on a body is so great. I know there's extort. I'm not talking it's a 1-for-1, but it's such a really, really good hate bear. It's an amazing hate bear. Paying the XX in white and destroying each artifact with mana value X is a really cool ability. It doesn't say X or less, so this is not a meltdown effect. It's exactly X. So if you basically pay white and sacrifice it, you can destroy all the mana crypts and stuff like that on the battlefield, which is not nothing. Pay white, sacrifice this to destroy everyone's, everybody's, 0 drops. That's something. All the treasures would die immediately and stuff like that. That's value. That's really good. So somebody docksides and they say, okay, I'm going to create 8 tapped treasures because Dauntless Dismantler makes them tapped. And then you say, okay, on your end step or whatever, I'm going to go ahead and just destroy all your treasures. I'm just going to sack it for 0, basically. The X's will be 0. That's a really good effect. Yeah. I think this will definitely see some play and a little bit more of the mid-range to control / stacks strategies. I don't think this is the next Drenith Magistrate, for example, because this is slapped onto a bunch of effects. This is not a new mechanic, and we don't see play on it. But I think this will be really good effect because that combined with that second effect as well. I think it's a really good card.
I agree with you. I almost can count on my hands the amount of times I actually extorted on a blind obedience. Maybe that makes me a bad player. I don't know. But
It does.
you haven't extorted your blind obedience? I just feel like every time I've done that, it's like, yeah, we're already losing. Might as well. Like,
No, first of all, you go infinite with Isochron Scepter and drain the table. You extort. The extort mechanic can do infinite times. So,
That's really good. I just
with
put it
Infinite
in.
Storm, you can win the game. I mean, I don't know if that's enough, but like, I'm just saying, like, I don't know if that's enough.
This is very true.
Yep.
But yeah, I think I would definitely take that sacrifice ability all day, every day. And like you said, you can easily just pay a white and get rid of the mana crypts. You can get rid of any problematic, pieces on the boards. I'm thinking of things like Grafdigger's Cage, things like that. That can really stop your strategies. All while slowing them down at the exact same time. And the fact that it also sacrifices means that you can shut it off whenever you need to as well. Maybe you need somebody to be able to respond to somebody else. It's like, okay, I'm slowing you down. Don't worry. I'll get rid of this and get rid of their soul ring. Go ahead. You may respond now with all of your things untapped. So there's some nice synergies with it. I like it. I like it a lot.
Yep. And this wouldn't be on my list if we didn't live in such a heavy dockside world. So it's like the number one card in our format. It really is. Thoracle, dockside, we know that this is what defines CDH. Dauntless Dismantler is a direct answer to Dockside Extortionist. It's simple as that. The treasures enter tapped, yours don't, and if they have all their tapped treasures and pass the turn, you could pay 1 white and destroy them all. It just completely nerfs the dockside save for removing it from their deck or killing it or whatever. Like, it's such a good answer to this card that we see so ubiquitous in this format. Everyone is running dockside, and if you're not in red, you're running clone and copy effects just to copy docksides. And this is a really good answer for that. And that's why I like this card so much.
Oof. Yeah, for that, I absolutely agree. That's really good. Yeah. And almost, if someone does that to me, I'm feeling really bad after that dockside. It's like, oh yeah, dockside for 8. Oh, that sucks. Yeah. It's really bad.
Yep. All right. We're to our number one. Kick us off. What is your number one pick? What? Go ahead.
I was about to say, do you want to just say it together? Because I think it's very clear what the number one card is.
Okay. All right. Ready? We're going to say it together. 1, 2, 3. The Micro Tyrant.
Yeah. Oh, well.
No, I'm just kidding.
Sorry, that failed completely.
We both have the exact same number one. Go ahead.
Yeah.
What is it?
It is, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this correctly, Kutzil Malamet Exemplar. It's the cat. it's the cat. The Silence Cat. If you've been looking at all of these cards, it's the one everybody's been talking about, and for good reason. There are a lot of things to like about it. I think the key things to know about it is that it's legendary, it's 3 cost, it's a cat.
Yeah, we could just read it. So,
and it's green.
It's 4. Yeah, Kutzil Malamet Exemplar is 1 of green and a white for a legendary creature cat warrior. Your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. So Grand Abolisher, kind of. I know it's not 100% Grand Abolisher, but basically, like you said, silence.
Yeah.
Whenever 1 or more creatures you control each deal with power greater than its base power, deals... That's so weird. Sorry, I'll say that again. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control, each with power greater than its base power, deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Silence on a body, and a draw engine for a 3/3 with 3. A 3/3 for 3. What are your thoughts?
Pushed. They pushed this card to the moon. Oh my god. Yeah. I like the fact that it's green. And that it's legendary. The reasons why those are super specific to me. Natural Order and Green Sun Zenith can now get these. That's something that you could not do beforehand, because you didn't really have it. I think the closest thing you had was like an Allosaurus Shepherd, and even then, that's only your green cards. And if you're in multicolored decks, that doesn't do anything for you. This is a silence effect that you can search with those cards. It's a cat. You can search it with the battle invasion of Ikoria because it's non-human. Get it out of your graveyard, so that's also relevant. It's legendary, so the immediate deck that I'm thinking of is Sisay. Being able to tutor this out as a straight silence effect is really great. You could do that with Myrel before, but Myrel's 4. This is 3. That's a lot easier to do with Sisay because you just need the other 2 colors. So yeah, I like this card a lot. I push to the moon. Any green-white deck is playing this. I 100%. I know we talked about TNT Copium earlier. Yep. Put that in. There you guys go. 5-color piles. I'm putting this in. Yeah. It's good. It's good.
Green needed help. And green is the weakest color in CDH, and it's been needing help for a while. I think this is a really good feather in green's cap. I know that it's white too, and if you're in white, you could probably do Grand Abolisher as well, and blah, 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 blah. But like, this is a really, really good effect. There's a reason that all the top white cards in our format are this effect. Silence, Grand Abolisher, all of those are this effect. And now the fact that we could staple this onto a green creature as well is really cool. And like you said, now Sisay players just got a boost with their 3-drop versus having to get, like you said, with Myrel. Because Grand Abolisher is not legendary, so they couldn't get that. But you can activate Sisay, and you're like, okay, well, if they have 3 fairy, then we have problems. But if 3 fairies off the battlefield for whatever reason or not available to search, you can get Cutsil now. And so that's a huge boon for Sisay. And just in general. So green's going to get some help, which is nice. Sisay is getting a boost here. And I think that this is just going to see play in green-white decks. I think it's a good ability. The body's not bad. The card draw, although it's a little weird, it's still card draw. So you have that stapled onto it as well. I think this is a fantastic card. Top card of the set, in my opinion. This is also, like you said, my number 1.
I think that's like a no-brainer. When it was revealed, I was like, wow, that's a card. And I kept thinking about it, and then I'm like, oh yeah, this deck will play it. This deck will play it. This deck will play it. Yeah, sure. It's definitely pushed to the moon. I do think green needs this a lot. And it's a cat. It's so cute too. It's nice. It's a little kitty.
It's the icing on the cake. Icing on the cake. It's great.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
That was our top 5 CDH cards for Lost Caverns of Ixalan. So what were your top 5 cards from the new set out there? So was there any that we missed? Which ones would you be putting in your CDH decks? Let us know in the comments and the show notes and all that kind of good jazz below.
Yeah, and make sure to give us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast aggregator. You'd be surprised at how much it helps. You can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and more. All links are in the episode notes and description below. And that pretty much wraps it up for this episode of the podcast. Tune in next time when we talk more about our favorite format and our favorite game, Magic the Gathering. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and we will see you next time.